Welcome to Landscaping Podcast. My name is Joel Barnett and I'm your host. And in today's episode, I'm talking with Clint Adams from the Hectogon Group. Clint is based in South Australia, and within the Hectogon Group, he's got an irrigation supply store, a couple of stores, a landscape supply yard, and he's also got an app called Dirt Cart, which is just about to release, which is ordering from the landscape supply yard to make things easier. So running that many businesses, Clint's obviously got some good business advice and knowledge, and he shares some of that throughout this chat. Something I liked early on in the episode, when he was working for other people, one of the things he did a lot was say yes to any new opportunity that came along. So that's a good way to progress yourself within a company. And then when you are working for yourself, it's a good way to progress your career that way as well. He's also a board member of the Master Landscapers Association of South Australia. So it was a good chat to him about what it's like on the inside there and the amount of work that they do for the landscape industry. And there's also a bit about delegating and the importance of that when you've got multiple businesses or even just a large business. So hopefully there's some value in this chat with Clint Adams. Clint, thank you very much for joining us on the Landscaping Podcast. So the first question I've got for you is how you started in the industry.
I don't know how deep you want me to go on that. So I fell into the landscaping industry accidentally. Straight out of school, I didn't finish year 12. I went, dropped out early and became a Domino's pizza franchise store manager. So I was selling running a shop, making sure that the pizzas went out and everyone was happy. And then a couple of years into that, a friend of mine who was working at a landscape supplies yard rang me and said, "Hey man, do you want to come and work here?" And I was like, "What does that look like?" And he goes, "Well, this is the amount of money, and it's kind of a Monday to Friday, some Saturday work. And you just be sweeping floors and putting poly fittings on the shelf, and you'll get on the job training." And I was like, "Oh, okay, wow, that's nuts. Like, that's more money than I was on for less responsibility, no weekends, no food." Like, it was a no-brainer for me, and it put me at the ground floor of a business that was, pretty substantial in South Australia, like probably one of the top 3 or 4 from a volume standpoint for landscape suppliers that had an irrigation arm. And then I kind of climbed the ranks there relatively quickly, and 5 years into my time there, I was at the time the sales and marketing manager. And then it got to a point where I wanted more money than, I guess a company was willing to pay someone to be an employee. And it wasn't really a plan for us to move into owning an irrigation shop. I was going to become a landscaper. Well, it's kind of disrespectful what we were doing and calling it landscaping, but we were landscapers for a little while. We had a company called Fluid Designs. I had a business partner at the time. And so we were meant to design and build water features. So the plan was to be the Adelaide's premier custom water feature construction company. And we never finished a water feature. And then started installing lawn and irrigation, which is something that I understood. And then that was not, I guess, it wasn't in line with what we wanted to do. And we kind of fell back into opening an irrigation shop. So I guess to answer your question, it was accidental to get in the landscaping industry. It was not something that I ever planned on doing it as a kid. Like, the goal was to for a long time to become a lawyer, like go to uni, become a lawyer, argue cases and make lots of money. But for various reasons, I didn't enjoy the last year or 2 of school and just dropped out and kind of fell into the landscape industry. In saying that, I'm very happy that I did. I don't know how many other industries you've been involved in, but it's such a beautiful industry, and the people that we deal with every day. Like, you're obviously lucky that you're now meeting lots of different people through this. Our customers are all landscapers, so we've got this great group of people that we deal with every day that, there's not too many heroes, and I've got a big group of people that I would call friends now that, are from the industry.
So how did the irrigation shop come about? Like, what were you doing irrigation stuff at the landscape supply yard?
Yep. So the owner of that yard had bought an irrigation franchise. So there used to be a company called Turf and Irrigation, which was a subsidiary of Hugel and Hoyle, which were a West Australian-based irrigation company. And they had some corporate stores and they had some franchise stores, which was a very similar model to what Domino's had. So Domino's Australia have corporately owned stores and they have franchisee stores. And so he had part ownership. There was another guy that had part ownership, and there was a guy working there called Dennis, who was probably in his, mid-60s when I started there. And they were selling irrigation under a franchise model. So it wasn't something like they were probably being semi-supported from the franchise. And then I was the sweep the floors, like, you know, the basic stuff, pack shelves kind of guy. And the owners kind of sold, one of them sold to the other one, and then the manager there moved on, and I took a management role, and it kind of just kept rolling. Like I kept getting asked, do you want to do this? And I was like, yep. And they're like, well, do you want to do this? And I was like, yep. And then all of a sudden I was running as a 21-year-old, 22-year-old, running an irrigation shop in South Australia, which just is such a foreign concept. Just like, I had no prior exposure to irrigation. I didn't grow up in an irrigation family. I didn't even grow up on a farm where, you know, maybe I'd fix stuff. It was just this thing that I never even knew existed. Probably like landscaping for a lot of guys that get into landscaping. And then, you know, now what is it? Say 15, 17 years later from when I started there, I've got 3 irrigation shops. So it was a smart move. I didn't know it at the time, but yeah.
And did you always have plans, like after initially wanting to be a lawyer, but did you always have plans to work for yourself and have your own business?
Not at all. That's a conversation that comes up from time to time, because I think there's a lot of entrepreneurs that will come out and talk about how they just couldn't see themselves working for someone, and that, you know, they were hustlers from school and they were buying lollies from Kmart or whatever and selling them at school or so. And I did a bit of that, but I didn't have a problem being an employee. I've got a very good ability to build rapport quickly with people, and I managed my relationship with my bosses pretty well. So I kind of had a fair bit of freedom because I was in every employment situation that I had, I was making the people money and I was doing my job well. So they kind of just let me do my thing. Now that I've left, it's weird to look back on it, because it wasn't the case, oh, I'm going to be a business owner, but I don't know how I'd go being an employee now. And I think, you know, if for whatever reason we sold, like if we had to sell up, or you know, there was some family health issues where I went, look, I just can't give this the time that it needs, or maybe I fall out of love of running the business or whatever and I go get a job. I don't know. I really don't know if I'd be able to go back to it. But I think for a person that's run a business of this size, I'm more likely to be able to go back to being an employee than anyone else that I know. Like I think I'd be okay. But I think if you ask my team that, my senior management, they'd be like, no way would you be able to go work for someone else, unless I had full autonomy. Like if they just said, you do whatever you want, and at the end of the year, you tell us how much money you've made us. But yeah, it wasn't always on the cards.
So did you take over the business, or did you leave that and start your own?
Which business? The business that with my business partner?
No. So when you worked your way up to that?
Oh, when I left there, yeah, no, they still exist. They're a competitor now. So, which is a bit of a it was probably handled as best as it could. So I left there with one of the other staff. So there was a purchasing manager and there was me, and I was in charge of sales and marketing. We were both young, so he'd worked with me at Domino's, and he was leaving first, and he didn't really know what he was going to do. I don't think. He just knew that he didn't want to work there, and he was maybe going to start his own business. And we used to go walking at night and just kind of talk. And he's like, you should leave too. Like, you know, we could do something. And I'd recently asked for more money and I'd got declined. And I was like, you know what? Yeah, let's do it. So it was never a plan to start an irrigation shop. We had this business called Fluid Designs, which was going to be a water feature business. And so we left amicably, and it wasn't like, at the time, I wasn't concerned that we were treading on any toes or anything. But then we weren't very good at running a water feature construction business. And we soon discovered that we didn't enjoy the physical demands of being lawn and irrigation installers. And at some point, I don't know, 18 months in, or might have even been 12 months in, Michael said to me, like, why don't we just open an irrigation shop? And it was a real, it wasn't a challenge, but I had to have this conversation with myself and kind of go like, the boss that we'd worked for was really good to us, and if we're opening an irrigation shop, we're now competing with someone that gave us the start that they did, and put us in a position to succeed inside his business. Taught us a lot about the human side of business and the relationship connection, and they're an Italian business with roots that go into the building industry that are quite deep, and they're well connected, and they care about their people as a priority, and it's all around connection and food and barbecues, and like it was a very connective environment. And so I've gone, shit, like this is not going to be great, but we did it anyway, and it was probably we've never sat down and talked about it, and it's been now what WaterPro's 12 now. It was never really addressed, but then we became competitors, and it's kind of like this weird dynamic where I think like if you did something like this in the landscape industry, it's not that common that you're going to be cannibalizing the other person's work if you're both kind of like swimming in your own kind of oceans. When you're supplying an industry, there's no way around it that you are going to take a shit on them at some point and win some work that might have been theirs, or have a customer move across. So it's a bit of a weird situation. Maybe one day when we're both, sitting on the beach reminiscing, we might talk about it at some point. But yeah, it's probably a bit of an unclosed book or an unwritten chapter for me there that we did. But we did start. So to answer your question, we started a new company, which was Fluid Designs, became an irrigation shop because the name was able to be used for that. And there was a period where we were running Fluid Designs and doing underground rainwater tanks as well. And then we had a shop selling irrigation, and we were kind of doing our own installs. And then as soon as we could remove the labor side of it, we did, and started just concentrating on selling irrigation. And then in 2010, the name changed from Fluid Designs to WaterPro because it was more in line with what we were doing. And Fluid Designs was a partnership, so we had some tax and structural issues that needed to be addressed. So we just took it as an opportunity to rebrand, and here we are.
So did that change? Did you buy out the partner when it changed to WaterPro?
It was after that. We were in a partnership for a while. It might have been 2 years. What was it? 08, 09, 09, 10. So we left Newton's in 08, end of 08. We opened Fluid Designs in early 09. So we did 08, 09 as a financial year, even though the 08, 09 wasn't a full year. And then we did 09, 10 together. And then I think we must have dissolved it in 10, 11, because not long after I was actually going through the process of paying him out, and we got audited by the ATO for not paying some super and some BAS, or not lodging BAS statements for our first 2 years. And so I reckon we must have been in business for 2 to 2.5 years. And then I wasn't happy. I don't think he was happy. It was a really nerve-wracking period for me, because I struggle still today with firing people, breaking up relationships, like that kind of honest communication around relationships when they're not working. And so I sent him this email like at night, the typical smash a bottle of red wine and hit send and go to sleep and deal with it in the morning kind of email. And turned out that he was on the same page. He was like, look, I don't really want to do this either. Do we shut it down? Do you want to buy me out? And we were able to work out the business was still quite young. It was almost a stock at value sale anyway. There wasn't too much value in the actual business, because it was a 2-person business that, how can you argue that there's that equity in there that's not? So yeah, then I bought him out, and then went it alone from there. And now I'm a sole director of every company that I own, and I don't see myself being a partner. That might change at some point, but partnerships aren't for me, which could almost support the argument that I probably can't be an employee.
Well, I was going to say, would you do partnerships again? Like, you might not do it now because you built it up where it is, but like back in hindsight, was it just that pair, or do you reckon it was just partnerships in general?
Yeah, look, I think that one thing that I've focused heavily on since then was clearly articulating my values and the values of the company. I think that a partnership will work better. It's not guaranteed, but it will work better if you have a clear understanding of the values of the company, and making sure that the values of the partners, be it 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 partners, are in line. If you don't have the same value structure, and me and him don't, we've got similar values. Like say if a human being has 12 core values or 10 core values, we might have had 4 or 5 that were the same, and we might have had 4 or 5 that were different, around treating humans a certain way, or using suppliers as a bank. Like, just some companies will happily let their trading terms go out. Some people will consider their staff an asset more than a liability. So we just had different values. I think if you had a company, if you were going to go into a partnership and your values were in line, and that I've seen it since then, because I'm quite cynical about partnerships, and whenever I see it, I always like to ask. It's kind of like this unicorn to me. I'm like, oh, tell me, how are you still in business together 10 years later? Like, why doesn't one of you hate the other one, or why don't you hate each other? And you start to see these where they've got their values are in line and their skill sets complement each other. I think the key thing that makes a partnership work is that the business makes money. When the business makes money, nothing's a problem. When the business isn't making money, both parties or all parties are shining a magnifying glass on anything the other person does. If they come in and do an hour less a week than they did, or they, spend a bit more money on a lunch with a client than they did, everything's under the microscope. But you look at some, and obviously this is just a general assumption, but you look at companies like Google, would you think the partners give a shit about their partnership? Like, they're fine, right? So yeah. I just think that if I was to go into a partnership again, and it's actually, I've come close a few times where there's been some JV stuff that's been potentially something that we would do, or that I would do. The thing is, my core business doesn't change, so everything that's under the ownership that we have now would still be mine, and then we do a JV that's separate to that. And I don't need the finance. So if it doesn't make money, I'm not emotionally disconnected. I'm evaluating the relationship based on the person, based on their values. And obviously, if I'm going into partnerships with people now, it's people that I've known for 2, 5, 10 years that I truly believe in their values. I've got employees who have their values are hardcore in line with mine, and at some point they might become an equity partner in part or all of the companies, or I'm playing with some ideas around buying, like having a separate company to own all the land that the company will own, or all of the buildings, and then maybe involving partnerships into the buildings rather than into the business, so that I'm still the dictator of what we do as a company, but they have financial interest in the buildings. So the company does well, the buildings rent gets paid, and their personal assets go up, but I don't lose equity in my business. So I don't know. I think the older I get, the more I realize that, I can't just put a hard and fast line in the sand and say we're not doing that again, because things change, And I think the last 3 years has showed us that you can't assume anything now, and who knows? Yeah. Like if someone I look up to that's built $100 million business came to me and said, I'd like to buy the controlling share in WaterPro, or 40% or whatever, I would have a hard time not saying yes to that, for the exposure to the learnings that I would get from someone that's done what I'm trying to do and shortcut me by 10 years potentially.
Yeah. So yeah, I'm the same with partnerships. So I've never been in one, but I know a couple of landscapers who are in partnerships, and I don't understand how they can do it, but they've been doing it for a long time and they seem to be doing well. And like you said, like money seems to fix a lot of problems. Like everything's going fine while you're making a profit, but as soon as that dries up, then you start to see the cracks appearing.
Yep.
So how did you put staff on early on when you started WaterPro? Was it just the two of you?
Well, one of our staff, the manager of WaterPro, is coming up to his 12 years now. So we hired, Michael and I were obviously the sole directors of Fluid Designs. Well, sorry, we were a partnership. So there was just the two of us. And for that probably first 6 or 8 months, I think it was just the two of us. You can kind of manage a decent volume of irrigation supply with 2 people. And then we hired Chris pretty soon after. He was our first hire. He's still with us. I'm pretty sure he's coming up to 12. So it would have been in the first 12 months. In the first 12 months, we hired someone, which was a crazy thing to consider, considering we'd only just started, and there's so much you don't know about business, especially if you don't go to an MBA or some kind of accounting degree early. You don't really know how to run a business in the first 12 months. You just do it because it seems like the natural progression. And even after working for other business owners, I wasn't privy to their accounting practices or payroll or whatever else. I just knew how to buy and sell stuff, and I knew relationships. So yeah, we hired Chris pretty early, and then kind of it feels like we've been hiring ever since.
So when did you decide to open up another store? Like, how long had you been operating when you did that?
Maybe 3 or 4 years. I'm not great with our timeline. I should map it out at some point. So we had Stepney was our first store, so we don't own that store anymore. So Stepney moved to Kent Town. Sorry, first we had Stepney, then we opened a shop at Salisbury Plain. I'm at Dry Creek now, which is our second WaterPro. Well, it's actually our third or fourth WaterPro, but it's one of 2 WaterPro locations in SA. We opened Stepney, then we opened Salisbury, and Salisbury, we closed it down. I think we had a 24-month lease there, and it just didn't kick. Like we and I know why. And if I opened another shop now, I know what to do. But it was a good learning experience that probably cost us 150 grand. But it didn't work. So we shut down Salisbury Plain. We moved Stepney to Kent Town, and then we bought Railways, which is at Ranella, which is a landscape supplies yard with a WaterPro in it, kind of thing. And then after that, we opened Dry Creek. So I think when we opened Salisbury, it was an ego play more than a smart business decision. It was about trying to get shops on the ground, and that's fine if you've got the kind of capital that Uber have when they're trying to move into new territories, and that you can have a runway of loss for a period. But we didn't have that. We were two kids that had just kind of started this business, and now we're opening a second location. And there's a lot of things you don't take into account around, supporting your staff, having the right staff in those locations. Going from 1 to 2 is the craziest. Like 2 to 3 is a lot different than 1 to 2. Like all the stuff you learn from 1 to 2, you take into 2 to 3. And I imagine when we move into Victoria, New South Wales, Queensland, the first one from another state will have a whole different kind of play to it. But I'd say 3. I reckon 2014. I know Michael was still around when we had Salisbury, so it wouldn't have been long. It might have been within the first 2 years we had a second store.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Yeah, so like you say, still learning to operate the one.
Mate, it was. We had I remember just one example. Like we were trying to hack. We were using QuickBooks as our accounting package back then, which we don't now. And somehow because Michael had a software engineering background, so he was trying to hack that we could make it look like we only had one location via a VPN, so that we could have QuickBooks operating at both locations. And it was just the stupid little challenges that you kind of come across along the way that you forget about until you do something like this. You remember them 10 years later. And then when we go to open Dry Creek, we go, well, we have to have at least 3 staff there from day one. We have to have a delivery vehicle. We have to hold this much stock. We have to have this many computers. We have to have this, all of this infrastructure. Otherwise, it's not a proper shop and it will fail. And so I don't no regrets about Salisbury, but because I learned how to open a second shop, it just would have been nice to not have to lose that money. But the money's gone.
Yeah.
Doesn't matter.
Have you ever done any business coaching or got a mentor?
Yeah, we did. Yeah. So from a formal education standpoint, I did a certificate 4 in frontline management when I was working for my last job. Prior to that, year 11, I have safe stage 1 to year 11, which is neither here nor there. Then at some point, I think Michael was still involved. It must have been early. Rob Cooper from Distinctive Gardens bought me a book called Built to Sell, which is it's a great book for anyone that's starting out in business to get a really basic understanding of running your business and getting it to a point that it's sellable, and then choosing not to sell it. Because if it's sellable, it's profitable and all that. And the Built to Sell funneled us into an accountant's web, and then they reached out. They had a business coaching division, and they're like, fill out this survey and we'll tell you, I don't know what your business is worth, some kind of funnel that gets you in. And then we started working with a guy called Simon Starr, who coached for us for 2 years, maybe 3 years. And that was a really scary proposition as well. That was at the time, $1,000 a month. It was so much money for us to pay someone to tell us, some changes that we can make in the business to be a better business. And then since then, we probably did that for, I'd say it's 3 years. I met my accountant through Simon. Then I felt that I'd learned everything that we needed to learn from Simon and didn't need to have him as our coach anymore. So we stopped that coaching. I think there's a lot of value in it, in coaching for everyone. I think that, I guess if coaching didn't work, tennis players wouldn't have coaches, golfers wouldn't have coaches. I am now kind of softly on the hunt for a mentor / coach for the next stage for me. But I need to be working with someone that knows how to grow a business to $100 million or at least $50 million. And a lot of those guys aren't actively looking for coaching roles because they've got businesses that make them $5 to $7 million a year. So why would they go coaching? And if they are going to coach, it's got to be more because they're passionate about it than to make money.
Yep.
So I have had a coach in the past. I don't currently have one now. And I think that I will have a mentor or similar, or a group of people potentially. It might even be an advisory board of some sort, just to help me understand. I don't know how to go from this stage to the next stage. It's all at the moment. I'm like just feeling my way as I go. I've never had, every day we're turning over more than I've ever turned over in the year previous. So it's all uncharted waters for me. So
yeah. Have you ever done any coaching or mentoring yourself?
Not too formally. There was a period in maybe 2015, 2016 where I kind of felt like I had my shit together, and I was really healthy. I wasn't drinking. I'd lost a lot of weight. I felt quite like I had the capacity to help others, and I put it out there, and I helped a few people with a kind of informal coaching. I'm not the guy that's going to sit down on the regular and have a meeting with you and then, like, I hate email. I hate taking notes. Like, I have an assistant purely for, like, to kind of make sure that all the things I promise get delivered, because I'm not good with follow-up. That's probably the best way to put it. And I think if you want to be a great coach, you need to have there's an accountability loop there for the coach and the person, and I'm not going to follow you up. So if I did move into any kind of coaching or advisory space, it would be more informal, and I probably do it informally because of my client base will ring me and go, "Hey, you got a stack?" And I'm like, "Yeah." And they're like, "Fucking this happened, and what do you think? Like, the customers told me that they're not going to pay for this. Like, do you think I should do this?" Or so I probably do it daily, but just not formally. And I don't see, and I'm obviously coaching my team internally all the time, but I don't see it becoming a formal thing, or a paid thing.
Yeah. Well, I think something that you do, which a lot of people would benefit from, is all the social media stuff that you do, particularly the YouTube channel. So you've been doing, you call it In the Car with Clint, where you talk for a couple of minutes on whatever your daily thoughts are. And you have to, well, as of today, it's like 229 of them that you've done, as well as other videos. So like, do you get some good feedback from that?
Not really. It's kind of funny. I have these moments where I'm like, is anyone even watching this? Like, does anyone care? And I had a friend of mine ring me the other day, and he's like, I think you need to change like the concept. I don't think In the Car with Clint works. Like, I think he gave me an idea, which I won't go into, but about changing the structure of how I deliver the content, and maybe setting it up differently. Because, like you said, I've been putting out, there's 220 odd there, but I've been making content on the internet for 4 or 5 years. Not like, you're maybe the second or third person that's ever asked me to go on a podcast. I've spoken recently at an event for the first time. I'm keen to talk more about my experiences. I'm interested to do podcasts. I do this every day. I mean, I don't know if you get the same kind of feeling after a podcast, but I love human beings, and I love meeting new people, and I love talking and learning about their life and their challenges, and then like shining a light on what they've done to maybe shortcut someone's learnings elsewhere, or just to, even if it just means that you feel good because you got to tell someone about yourself and it goes on the internet. And I think if I could do that every day, I would. Like, how you said before, like, if you pump out one a week or a podcast a week for the next 10 years, you'd be a happy man. I'm the same. The crazy thing is, I just don't get asked. And then I post stuff and put it on YouTube and it doesn't get seen. So there has to come a point where I go, well, if no one's watching it, then maybe it's time to change the way it's being delivered. You obviously mentioned that your video version of podcasting is not as concerning to you as your audio version of your podcasting. Maybe it's that. Maybe the clips need to be, I don't know, TikTok or shorter, punchier. The best reach I've had on TikTok is just where I went on a rant and I was swearing and I was angry. And it's just stupid because there's so much more value in all the other stuff that I'm saying.
Yeah.
And if you seriously listen to my 220 odd In the Car with Clints and actually actioned 10% of them into your business, you'd make more money, or you'd have more time, or you'd be happier. Just no one, I don't know. and to answer your question, I do get some good feedback. I'll get a message from someone saying, "Thanks, man, that was really timely. I needed to hear that today. I didn't realize." And there's probably another 10 or 12 people a day that watch it and don't say anything, and it's given them something different to think about, or it's got them through a tough time, or they think I'm an idiot. I don't know.
Yeah, so I struggle with the algorithm of Instagram, like, because I'll put up a 1 minute clip of one of these podcasts, and I think that the value in it is just phenomenal. I just want heaps of people to see it, but the reach on those clips is never anything near anything else that I do. It's so frustrating.
You got to pay to play, my friend. It's not Instagram and Facebook and mature platforms. You're not going to get, unless you can work out a way to hack the algorithm by doing something outrageous or, like a Mr. Beast style thing, or something with boobs, or guns or war. Like, it's just people say that that's like they're interested in certain things, but then go look at someone's Instagram discovery and you'll see what they're really interested in. And I think there's good business content, there's good landscaping business content in what you're doing and what I'm doing, and you think that it could benefit people. But I guess if Instagram aren't showing it to the people, then
yeah,
maybe it's, I don't know, maybe there's not enough people out there. But if you pay, you'll get seen. But then you do this for free, it costs you money to do it because you're taking time out of your life. Unless you have a greater plan to move into the media and see value in, like, I guess, trying to elevate yourself to a point where you get noticed by a Channel 7 or a Channel 9 or a Channel 10 or a Spotify or whoever, what would be the benefit of you spending money on boosting it other than dopamine?
Well, that was my original plan, was to try and get into media. And then as soon as I started doing these and watching myself back, I thought, oh, no, your personality is not what people want to see on TV. So so now I do it for my own enjoyment, and other people benefit out of it as well. But yeah, I think I tell people it's the podcast is more, the audience is more quality over quantity. So
it's a micro niche. Yeah.
The people who listen to it love it, but you're not going to get millions of downloads. But they're the ones who do a good quality listens.
I'll start doing more business podcasting. Like, we've got another podcast lined up. I don't know if you can see, I've got a pinball machine sitting next to me. We've got a business podcast that we're going to do with the pinball machine, which will be business people talking about business. It won't just be me talking to landscapers about landscaping. And I think that might have a bit more, it'll have an entertainment component and an education component. And maybe that might be the play for you. If with the landscaping, there might be an education component and an entertainment component. And, you might, this is actually probably a good one. Like, you could do something where you actually get, especially because you are a landscaper, like you could, build something with someone and talk to them while you're doing it. And that might help you on the, the TikToks or the Instagrams of the world, where it might be that 3-minute clip, but the video is, a sped up thing of you building something. I don't know. Like, I think if you're not getting the results that you desire on those platforms, maybe, you got to test different things. And we talk about that here. We do a lot of our own paid advertising for LawnHub, which is one of my companies. You can see that there. We're testing all the time, like, change the image, change the video, change the text. And we spend like over $1,000 a day on advertising for that company. Once you start paying, people will see your stuff, because that's how the business model works.
Yeah, I also don't change anything about my posts either. So I've done it the exact same way since I started. So obviously, if that didn't work,
so you think about it, like, if you're expecting a different result, but you're not putting in a different level of effort, like, you're not going to get a different result.
Yeah. So I think your landscape, your podcast, The Full Landscape, was, I reckon, possibly one of the first Australian landscaping podcasts that I ever came across about 3 years ago. So where did the idea come from to start that?
So the idea, all of our media came around me consuming Gary Vaynerchuk's content. So Gary V, I guess you would be aware who Gary V is, but for anyone listening that isn't, he's an American entrepreneur that is at the forefront of adoption of different media platforms for the benefit of growing his business and businesses that he works for. He was like, you need a podcast, you need a podcast, you need a podcast. I was trying to grow WaterPro at the time. It was the only business that I owned. It made sense to me to do a landscaping podcast. I had access to a bunch of landscapers. They were my client base. Obviously, Inika Clark, who was the MLSA CEO at the time, had as much access to those people as I did, and then was also comfortable behind, on the camera. So we just started and just did that. And then, one turns into two and two turns into three. And then you get the bug for it. And then you kind of get, you get some positive feedback, or one of the clips pops. Or for me, you podcast someone who didn't know who your business was, and then they become a client or a friend or both. And then it just kind of kept going. And then you go through periods of famine where you just, I'm dealing with, like, I bought another company. The last thing I was thinking about doing was podcasting while I was going through a merger acquisition process, starting a new business, trying to blend cultures of two businesses, dealing with banks, trying to finance things. Like, you just don't do it for a while. So then you stop and then you start. And then every now and then you'll get someone, like you or someone else go, hey, when's your next one coming out? And you're like, oh shit, I forgot people actually, like, I have a responsibility to keep making them because I've kind of asked these people to listen. Now they're actually listening. What are you doing? You need to keep making them. So yeah, that was probably the reason to start it. Just Gary V kind of motivated me. I like the idea. I like the attention. I like people listening to me and watching me and asking me questions. I feel like I have an obligation to shine some light on the landscaping industry. It's given me a life that, a 1.1% population life. So if I can shine some light on it, we've got the means to do it, then I feel like it's an obligation. Once you kind of have made it, and I wouldn't say I've made it, but once you're in a position to, if you don't pay it forward in some capacity, then it all breaks.
I think another thing I heard of that you, like in terms of paying it forward, you had like a dinner, the landscape dinner that you organised. Yep.
We've got another one coming up on, might be the 16th or the 17th this month. We've started them again.
So what was that? That was just like you just got a bunch of landscapers together for dinner just to all meet up and chat. Like, it's almost like an informal industry night kind of thing, was it?
Yep, build a community. It's, probably like an excuse for me to drink beer and call it a work commitment. But like I've said a few times, like, there's a lot of people in this industry are my friends now. And, from a commercial standpoint, it's not silly for me to put 10 irrigation spenders in a room together and drink beer with them. There's no implied contract. They don't have to buy shit from me. I charge them to come. So it's not like, they're coming because it's a free night on the beers. They get benefit from it. The one that I've just organised now, we've got 15 people committed to a dinner, and we're just trying to sort out the dates. I think we had like 15. There's an app. You can send out an app with all the suggested dates, and people kind of vote for the dates that they want to go to. We'll punch them out. Mate, I'd do them weekly if I could. Like, it gives us a good opportunity to understand people's wants, needs, and desires in our industry. It gives the guys an opportunity to talk to each other about the things that are going on. And similar to your podcast and my podcast, helping people to understand that they're not on an island when it comes to dealing with any issue that's happening in their business, whether it's finance, clients, staff, their spouse not supporting the amount of time they're working, whatever it is. These guys are able to go, oh yeah, same problem. So it gives them and I say guys, it's not a man only thing. Obviously the industry is heavily male owned, but we have, I guess, whatever the percentage of male to female is, we do have the dinners where it might be 90-10 or 80-20, and that's just the reality of the available people. But it gives them an opportunity to sit down and just talk about their problems, and gives me an opportunity to do some business development in 3 hours. So I get to see 10 clients in 3 hours rather than over 10 weeks, but I also just enjoy doing it. So, any opportunity I get to go to something, a dinner, a lunch, a podcast, speak. I've got an event. Actually, I'm doing a thing tonight for, there's a Facebook group that's become a business over here called SA Mums in Business, where I'm a guest on their, I guess, I don't know what it's like a series of a term where they have speakers come in. I just love, connecting with people. And if that helps them, one of them subcontracts another one to do a job, they don't want to do their wet lay anymore, or they don't want to dig out their foundations. This guy's got an excavator, this guy doesn't have the one, and it just kind of builds a community. I think it just makes sense if you can do it.
Yeah, so that's another kind of thing that you're doing, that's kind of mentoring / coaching in a less formal way, and you're benefiting out as well. But so that's what business coaches do as well. They benefit out of getting paid for it. So
and so I make the money from people buying sprinklers. I don't need to charge for that. I think that those dinners you could probably make money on if you wanted to. I don't charge the full price. I just charge a nominal fee to make it. It's a commitment fee, really. Like, we'll charge $50 and it will cost me 110 a head by the time everyone smashes 10 beers. But that's fine. They'd pay. Most of the guys, they'll say to me, you don't need to pay for this, man. Like, it's not your responsibility to do this. Like, we just appreciate that you're actually organizing it.
Yeah.
We'll pay our own way. But, there's also like they're still clients. And if we can do some client entertainment inside it, like I'll have 3 or 4 of my team there, and I'll be strategic about that. I'll bring, like, I think this one here, we're trying to bring the manager of railways to ensure that he gets access to clients that are WaterPro clients first, that aren't spending a lot of money with railways. But if those guys all go home and never buy anything like that, if they don't buy anything from railways, I don't care. It's more just about getting in front of them and getting an invitation, or putting a please out there. And if we don't get a yes, then it's fine too. Doesn't mean they're not coming to the next one. Or like a good example, like Rob Cooper from Distinctive Gardens, right? I'm pretty sure it's public knowledge now that he's decided to close his business and that he's moving into a different role, running something for someone else. He'll still get invited to the dinner, right? He's not, I mean, he might buy stuff from me, but he's not a customer anymore. He's a friend that I've developed through being in the industry. It's not, you know what I mean? There's no, like, if they'll come to dinner because they're an interesting person and they get along with that group. Like, you kind of have your little groups that kind of work, and we just do it. So for anyone that listens to this that isn't in those 15, please don't be upset that we will be having regular dinners now that the world's somewhat calmed down.
Yeah. So I think recently, I don't know if you still are, but you were on the board for the MLSA. Is that?
Yep, I still am.
Yep.
Yep.
So is that as consistent with the meetings now as what it was in the past, or are you starting to ramp that up?
Well, nothing's really changed. I mean, boards, we meet less frequently than, I was on the board 5-7 years ago when it was a vastly different board to what it is now. And then I've been connected to the board, obviously through Inika's time as CEO, and then I became a board member recently. The frequency of meetings has changed since I was on the board last, but I think that the world's a lot different to what it was 5 years ago, 3 years ago. And, you know, boards in general are able to operate a lot differently than they may have in the past. So a lot of what we do around management of board meetings and subcommittee meetings is done digitally now. You know, we can have a motion voted for via email without having to call a meeting and go all drive to a location and sit there and meet. So yeah, there's nothing's changed. I mean, if anything, the actual association itself is more active than it ever has been. And it's probably driven by the fact that the association has employees now rather than just board members that are required to do the work. Like anything in early stages of starting up, a board, when it has no employees, the board members are the only people doing the work. And quite often they're also trying to run a business and keep a household together and, you know, be a friend and a partner and a dad or a mum. And so I think it's easier to be a board member of that association now than it was 5 years ago, because you've got the support of the people that are actually employed to do the work.
Yeah.
I hope that answers your question.
And is the main message they're pushing getting people licensed? Is that a big issue in South
Not
Australia?
the main issue. That is a big issue. The landscape industry in South Australia, I don't think is vastly different to the landscape industry across Australia. And the role, there's a strategic plan that's in place by the association to concentrate on a few different pillars. Obviously, licensing is something that's important, and by the association going out and advocating for landscapers to be licensed ensures that consumers have work being performed by people that are actually skilled and licensed to do what they're doing. It ensures that landscapers have something tangible to hold on to when they finish their landscaping apprenticeship or go for their license. And it also ensures that landscapers are able to charge rates in line with other trades that are licensed and get the value for the time that they've put in, and they're going to the skills that they've got in mastering the landscaping. Beyond that, the Landscape Association's role is to obviously build connection between suppliers and customers, but it's also about highlighting what landscaping is to consumers. So as a board, we see it as our responsibility to help grow the public's opinion of what landscaping is, and highlight. So the licensing is part of that, but then also highlighting why that there is an industry that is landscaping, that if you have a child that's about to finish school as a parent and they come home and say, I want to be a landscaper, that means something to you as a human being. And, you know, that's a challenging thing. How do you as an association change the population, the way they think about an industry? Like, that's about continuously rocking up and speaking at events and lobbying governments and trying to get funding and trying to get on lists. Like there's government lists of trades that might be in shortage, or the apprenticeships that need to be put on lists of, even there's a training list now, I think it's called Appendix I, of training certificates and apprenticeships that you get funding from the government if your staff do it. Now, we as an association are actively trying to lobby that. A lot of that doesn't get seen. And anytime there's criticism from landscapers or people in the industry around what the actual board does or what the association's for, it's usually because it hasn't been communicated to them. It's not because it's not being done, it's because they don't know that it's being done. So I think there's 4 subcommittees, and I'm not sure, I'm, as a board member, I can't talk too much about board specifics.
Yep.
But I think everything I've told you today is completely fine, and it's public knowledge that we are actively doing that, and it's going to take time. It's really hard for a board and an association to kind of continually go out to members and say, we need your support to help us support you, because all it takes is one thread of someone going, well, but what do we get for our money? Or like, or they're upset because they didn't get the same as them or whatever. Everyone that's on the board as a member is a volunteer, and all of the staff that work for the association would have no problems finding another job, right? They're highly skilled people, and they're emotionally bought into to making a difference in this industry, because they can see that it needs someone to push that. So I think we just need kind of 5 to 10 years of unconditional support, which I know is hard, and the association will turn for the better, and you'll see licensing clearly covered on a national scale, because not licensing nationally is really inconsistent. Like your license to work in Victoria might not allow you to work here. It'll also see a half generation below us now that are coming through school, growing up, wanting to become landscapers. And then it will also see a greater community that get to a point where they're comfortable paying whatever the hourly rate required to make money and do the job well is just like paying a plumber or an electrician or an architect or a doctor or whoever, because they believe in the qualification.
Yeah, I've spoken to a few people about that in the industry, about trying to get into schools to talk to people and tell them how awesome the landscaping industry is. Like when you just show them a couple of photos, basically everything outside of the house you can do as a landscaper. So yeah.
Well, it's one of the most complex trades, like, and to be honest, even more so than a builder for some people, because in a lot of landscaping businesses, they're not subcontracting any of the work. They're doing every piece of the work. Like it's a deep, detailed trade, and everyone thinks it's lawn mowing and watering a lawn. Like it's just it's a branding issue that needs to be addressed. And if you don't have the resources, it's really hard to change people's perception.
Yeah, like I've mentioned a couple of times, there's things I don't like about Landscape Victoria, but I'm well aware that, like, I've been a member for forever, and always will be, because I know that overall they're awesome for the industry.
I had a conversation with a client who said to me that he didn't agree with some of the things that might have been happening with the association, and he said, but I'm not willing to get involved, so I'm not going to say anything. And I think that was probably the best thing that he could have said to me, and it was really like it was a point of clarity for me that there's plenty of people that are happy to sit at home watching TV complaining about what people are doing, trying to improve something, but those people aren't willing to go to a meeting. We have an AGM and 10 or 20% of the members rock up, if that. Like, but then you've got that 80 or 90% sitting at home throwing rocks. Like, if you really care, come and voice, like, as a board, and like the board represent the members, and then the CEO and the staff are directed what to do by the board. It's a membership owned association. If you've got something you want to say, that's all associations. LV would be the same. Like, what do you want from your association? No one says anything until they don't like what happened and they just complain about it. That's not how it works. So I think that's, and the amount of money that you would be paying towards your membership would be hopefully negligible in the grand scheme of things. You don't have to not eat for a week because you paid your membership. Like, it's just part of your cost of operation. And if everyone can keep putting in enough that it keeps the association going, and that, the association don't have some rogue president that's trying to grind their own axe, which I've seen before. But if everyone's comfortable that in general the direction is headed where they believe it should go, I think it's in the interest of the landscapers to continue supporting their association. Then people like me who make money from the association, from the industry, to continue sponsoring and supporting their events, and obviously being involved in board positions if that's something that you think that you can bring value to. As soon as I don't think I'm of value to the board, I will remove myself from nomination. I'll step aside, and like, it hasn't come up, but if I think that there should be a decent percentage of landscapers, landscape designers, and people that are actually not suppliers of the industry as board members and members. And if the balance shifted too much in the wrong way, then I'd probably talk about that. And that's in all states. I think that sometimes you've got associations that are at risk of being steered in a different direction because of the financial interests of a supplier or a key influencer in an industry that's got a lot of sway. So as long as you can keep it, like, for landscapers and landscape designers, by landscapers and landscape designers, with the support of people like me, then I think it'll get where it needs to go.
Yeah, the Landscape Victoria board's pretty balanced. I don't know if it's deliberate. I think it might be deliberately, but they've got residential designers, residential builders, commercial.
It's really hard to do that deliberately, like really hard. You need those people to nominate, and it's voted. So for you to do that deliberately would be a surprise for me if they've done that deliberately without some heavy lobbying, because it's all votes. Like, you imagine trying to say, like, get the Australian government or the Victorian government to have a farmer who's a man, a farmer who's a woman, a businessman who's a man, a businessman who's a woman, businessman who's a woman. Like, you can't do that. They're voted positions, and if that stacks out that 90% of them are men that own businesses that earn this much money, that's just the reality of how the system works. But yeah.
Earlier on, you said, I think you got 4 businesses now, is it?
There's lots of companies. There's 3 businesses that generate an income. There's a 4th business that's an app that's in its beta testing phase. So Hectogon is the parent company of WaterPro, which is the irrigation business, Railways, which is the landscape supplies business, LawnHub, which is our direct-to-consumer fertiliser business, and there's a 4th business called Dirt Cart, which is an app that we're developing at the moment that should be ready. Well, it's ready, but building an app is, I don't know how to do it, so I have to pay someone to do it, and then you're at the mercy of them. So they're the 4 companies that I spend my time managing, I guess.
So what would be the key to being able to do that? Because I imagine there'd be a fair bit of delegation involved if you got that many.
Massive amount of delegation. Anyone that's followed any of my stuff for any period of time will understand that the most important thing to me around owning and growing businesses is the people that I have working in those businesses. My staff turnover is low. I will compromise on my financial position or my happiness within reason to ensure that a staff member gets what they need. I don't micromanage my team. I have a very clear position on how I want things done, and I will get involved in weird shit when it pisses me off. If someone's put a car in the wrong spot or like hasn't washed a car, and yet I'll happily let staff go to a meeting that is worth $500,000 and I don't have anything, I don't touch it. So letting these guys kind of run their own shit with my support is the only way for me to be able to grow. We've got 44 staff now across 3 locations, or 4 locations, 3 to 4. We've got a building that doesn't have an operational purpose, but it's available. So I can go, I'd say the staff at Railways I haven't seen for 60 days, and I know that they're fine. And that probably the last thing is I over communicate with them via WhatsApp, email, YouTube. I do private link videos on YouTube to the team regularly. I haven't done it recently, but I don't want to send out videos for no reason. They all have my mobile number. I mean, my mobile number's on the internet. Anyone can find it. And if they need me for anything, they're free to text and call me. I respect their confidentiality, even if it's complaining about their direct superior or whatever, and they don't want me to tell them. They just need me to know about it, and they want me to do nothing about it. I support them. I'm probably more supportive of people personally than most businesses are and most people would know. And we do a lot for individuals when they need support than we talk about, because it's not why I do it. And so if you do all that, you give them a clear understanding of the direction that we're going, the tools and resources that they need to do it, the freedom to do it, and then just move obstacles out of the way. That's all I know. And I might, as I grow to the next stage, I might have to be a bit different, or we might have to hire some more university graduate leaders, because it's just a different thing. But for now, it really works really well. We're a group of misfits that are all kind of sprinting in the same direction and dropping a bit of shit on the way, but it seems to work.
In the early days, did you have people telling you to like back off and let them run their job if they're running a particular store? Were you kind of getting too involved, or?
No, not really. I've never had that. I'm probably under involved more than over involved. It hasn't been hard for me to not get involved, because it doesn't interest me. Like, I don't get caught up in, like, I'll look high level and go, this business needs to turn over this much a month, and this is the profit that it's required to make. And if it doesn't, I want to know why. But no one gets written up on it. No one's ever been fired for it. Like, we miss budget. What is WaterPro were under budget 100 grand last month, and railways were under 50 grand. We addressed it and talked about it. We understand the reasons. What am I going to do? Fire them for it? Like, so I just don't get too involved. They know they're harder on themselves than I am on them when they don't do what they believe we need to do. All of these got, we've got, I think that there's people above the line and people that are below the line, as far as their emotional connection to the business and their desire to work for Hectogon for the rest of their lives. The guys that are above the line, the guys that are employed, that want to be senior managers in a company that's doing $100 million and are happy to spend 10 or 20 years, working here and growing in their roles. I don't need to get involved in what they're doing. Like, they're harsher on themselves than I am. So the Salisbury shop, when we opened that was our first experience of that. You know what? The only people that complain about being micromanaged are the people that aren't doing it, right? There's this kind of, you get the staff that are like, I don't like being micromanaged. You're like, you're not being micromanaged, you're being managed. And the reason you're being managed is because you're not doing the job, right? The guys that are doing their job, they're not getting managed. Like, that's blissful. My general manager, Matt, he doesn't want to fucking go down to railways and make sure Luke's doing his job. He loves that he doesn't have to go down there and make sure Luke's doing his job. Like, that's his job. Like, Matt's job is to move shit out the way. When Luke rings him and goes, hey, I need $12,000 to put some stupid metal part on the JCB. Can I do it? That's all he does. He doesn't go down there and go, the phone rang too much, or, I mean, he probably does, but why is this shelf not here? Like, that's Luke's job. So I think that makes it very easy for us that we put the right people in the right places, give them the autonomy to do what they need to do. We're probably, the biggest weakness we have as a business is not removing people from those positions quickly enough if they're not right for the positions, and under communicating our expectations of them early, and then under communicating concerns with them in their probation period. And I think the next stage for us, if we can start really clearly outlining, and this is what this year's about for us, 2022 is very much about policy. We don't have it, like, this will blow your mind. I'd say we've got 44 staff. No one has an employment contract. It's just something that I don't care about. I'm a handshake guy. People that have needed them for either visa conditions or to get a home loan or whatever will quickly knock something up. But it's just never bothered me. Like, I just don't consider it a thing. But now it's a thing. Everyone needs an employment contract. So we'll get them in place, and then that'll clearly outline the expectations of the business. And then Matt and I and our management team are going to need to get better at communicating in those early stages that, look, this is what we expect of you. You're not meeting the standard. How can we help you? Do you really think this is the job for you? And as much as I say to my staff, I'm open, you come and talk to me if you need to. If you don't want to work for me, you come and tell me, and I'll find you another job. I'll help you. I'll be your referee. I'll ring people that are in the industry that might be more suited to what you're doing. We've had maybe 2. So I reckon Maxie did it, and another staff member who ended up staying, that they needed to move for various reasons, whether it was financial or geographical, whatever it was. I I say to them, come to me and I'll help you, right? Even if you need an 8-month exit, right? Because you're moving to Cairns or like, you're moving back to where you like another country, let me know, because it's easier for me to manage. They still don't do it. So I guess I try to be as approachable as possible. I try to let them do their job. And I think if, you can stitch all that together in some kind of like mishmash of whatever that is, it just works. Well, it kind of works. It works 8 out of 10.
So valuable having the right people as well to be able to do that.
It's funny, every time, every day you could have said to me, like, do you have the best group of people you've ever had? And I feel like we do. And we just keep improving it. You kind of, you might, at any one point, you might have 10% of the business don't really care, right? There's guys in the business that are just mailing it in because they're either, they can't be bothered looking for another job. They really don't care about it as much as I do. And that's fine. Like, that you're going to have that in a business when you've got a certain amount of people. But if those people just choose to leave because we highlight to them that maybe they'd be happier elsewhere, and it's not that they're being forced out, but like, I'm happy to have those conversations and go, look, you don't seem happy. Are you happy here? Not really. Well, what do you want to leave? Like, do you want me to help you find another job, or do you want me to change something to help? If you can reduce the amount of people that aren't happy for various reasons by either helping them find another job or maybe like explaining something about their job that they haven't seen. I think a lot of times people are angry about something that's happened, but they haven't seen it from the point of view of the other person, or they're looking at it selfishly about their own wants and needs, and they're not looking at the company as a whole. Like, we have to protect the company as a whole as a priority. If you can get those guys set up to either leave or stay and be happier and reduce the percentage of people that are below the line, it just gets better and better and better. And I feel like we've got the best team we've had. I think there's still probably 2 or 3 people there. I think there's going to always be 2 or 3 people that would like some change or that aren't super happy, but you don't know what's happening in their personal lives. And if they're not going to tell you, that, you can't probe that. Like, you kind of just, you do the best you can. And I think the last thing is you can't be too hard on yourself. Like, it's never going to be perfect. There's going to be staff that leave that you probably should have addressed some issues with before they left, and they might have stayed. There's going to be customers that you upset and you don't know about it until 2 years later, and you get an opportunity to deal with it then. Like, it's just, if you worry about everything and get too involved in everything, your heart will explode. So, or your brain will.
What's coming up next for the Hectogon group? Is it like this year or further?
We've got 2 directions, and we'll probably do both because I'm a psycho. But at the start of the year, my goal was, I had 2 goals. One was to get my weight to a certain number, and one was to make a certain amount of money in 12 months profit for the business. My health's my biggest liability because of the extreme nature I have around alcohol and food consumption. And if we want to grow the business to the volume that I want to grow the business to, we need to have enough cash to start doing mergers and acquisitions. The Adelaide market, we probably could open one more irrigation shop here by either opening one or buying one. It's more likely that we'd try to acquire an irrigation shop if we did. I'm coming over to Victoria in 25 days or whatever it is to look at understanding the Victorian landscape market more and whether or not how WaterPro might fit in Victoria. I would say, like, the real honest answer is we will set a goal to not do any mergers and acquisitions and save money this year and just stabilize based on what's going on in the world. I think we're going to have supply issues. I think we're going to have, costs go up, and, we just need to probably have a sensible year. I think we'll probably see a few big companies go bankrupt, which will flow on to some smaller landscapers. So we're probably going to lose more money in bad debt this year than we ever have had. So, try and be sensible around what we're spending. I think the plan will be to do that. And at some point between now and June 30, I'll go look at a business and the deal will be too good. And I'll come back and I'm like, Matt, we're buying this shop in Melbourne. And he'll be like, no, we're not. And I'll be like, yeah, man, it's all good. It'll be easy. And he's like, no, we can't, man. You told me we were going to just have a stable year. We're going to save some money and look at mergers and acquisitions in 2023. And then we'll probably open our first shop in Melbourne and I don't know, or Melbourne. How do they say it in Melbourne? We don't know. I've got a strategic planning session on the 8th with my accountant and Matt. My plan is today and tomorrow to get a survey, without being too tacky, out to my team around the things that they see as their needs, wants, and desires, the things they think we should start, stop, and keep doing, the things that they see as opportunities and threats that I'm not seeing because I'm not at the same locations as them or the levels as them. The number one goal for me is to get the company to $100 million of annual turnover. And so what we'll do is, with that in mind, we'll go into the strategic planning session and say, what is going to be the quickest way for us to get to that? And so that, whether or not that's mergers and acquisitions of irrigation companies, whether or not LawnHub needs investment, and we might go out and source external investment and sell portions of that to try and grow that and get that into different markets. But that's the best answer I can give you without having a strategic plan. So yeah.
And the last question for you is, what's the best piece of business advice you've ever received, or that you give out?
Oh man, there's heaps.
I suppose you got 220 odd videos.
Well, I reckon there's probably 150 in there. I reckon I've probably repeated myself a bit. I'll give you what's on my mind at the moment. So if you want to be successful in business, the best thing I think you can do is get a very strong understanding of what the strategy is around your business, and a very good understanding of the values of you and your business. Draw a map of what you want to do, and then just start working towards everything that kind of gets you to the end of that map. I think that too many people start businesses because they want to be a whatever, and none of them think about the costs of this, or the strategy of that, or what happens when this comes up, and what are our values. And if you can set yourself some rules and set yourself a map, when you are offered opportunities that are not in line with the rules or the map, you'll turn them down. And when you do that, you'll be happier, which is a massive one, because you won't be stressed because you're not doing things you shouldn't be doing. And you'll be more financially successful because you're doing things that are in line with the things that you want to be doing. So you'll do them better. That's probably the thing that's at the top of my mind at the moment.
Yeah, I like it. Clint, thank you very much for coming on. I'm going to be following along with your journey as you go. I look forward to when you open up your first Victorian store. So I'm sure.
Well, I'm keen to catch up when we're over there. So we've got a fair bit of time, because we've got a dinner on the Tuesday and we've got a lunch on the Friday, and we've got nothing in between. So I'm keen to record some podcasts while I'm over there if anyone's keen to do a face-to-face. But yeah, I'll see you tomorrow.
Sounds good. All right. Thanks, Clint.
No worries, man. I'll chat to you soon.